What's up, guys? It's Dem Apples here. This is part one of another series that I'm gonna do, Winning Chess Brilliancies, and these games are gonna come from Yasser Seirawan's book, Winning Chess Brilliancies. There are like 11 or 12 games in this book. I think there deserve to be more because there have been many games, great games recently. All right, this is Fischer Spassky Game 6. Bobby Fischer, of course, world chess champion after this in 1972. The first and maybe the only American to become a world chess champion. I'm not quite sure about that. But yeah, this is 1972. Boris Spassky is right now the reigning world champion, and this is game 6. Alright, so let's take a look at this game. Fischer starts out with c4. Now, I find this really interesting. In fact, I'm going to put a little blunder next to it because Fischer is known for saying 1e4, best by test. And Karpov's, I don't know, their people said that they suspected that Fischer, for this particular game, wouldn't play 1e4. I'm not quite sure why, but they thought he would play something different, and Fischer did indeed play something different. Best by test, right? So Karpov goes for e6. He's trying to get a queen's gambit decline after d4, d5. Knight of 3. He does not want to commit to d4 yet. D5 and d4. Now Yasser gives a lot, and knight of 6. Now this looks like a relatively simple opening. I think it is. But he gives a lot of attention to detail about this opening, including this interesting line. dc4. Spassky played knight of 6. He says dc4, e4, b5, a4, c6, and no, not a6 because pawn takes pawn, rook takes rook, white wins a rook and probably the game. So b3, undermining the queen side here. So black is forced to make a concession. Takes, and bishop takes. And this is what he gives in the book. These are not the best moves, by the way. Actually, engines have gotten much better since he's published this book, and there are some mistakes in the analysis, but I'm going to show both, like his analysis and modern day computer engine analysis. Because it's funny, actually, in some of his notes, they missed a mate in 3 and they missed a mate in 8, which grandmasters don't tend to do. So it's interesting. Anyways, knight c3. This is an interesting position, by the way. Black is not lost, but I'm not quite sure what's going on. I feel like white has a slight pull. It's a very interesting position, and he says that you should play it with some friends. Alright, knight c3, bishop e7. We have a very calm queen's gambit declined, h6. And Karpov was very well known at this point for playing this b6 move. Actually, he puts a relatively deep note to the move h6. Always want to give your king some room to breathe, you know? And he actually marks it as a good move. But I don't think it's anything special. Just try to make love for your king. Okay, bishop h4, moving away, maintaining pressure on this diagonal still. b6, Karpov really liked these setups. He would go for b6, and he would go for bishop b7, and knight d7, and he would crush everyone in it. So he goes for this in the World Championship match. What takes the pawn? Changing the pawn structure is very important to note. And black takes back with the knight. Now, Yasser also puts a deep note to this. The reason why pawn takes pawn here is slightly inferior is because it's pretty deep, but black has a bit less space, you know. White's pieces are slightly more advanced than their black counterparts, you see, like here. Like, white has basically one more rank of space. And when you're down in space, per se, you should aim to exchange pieces, which is what Spassky is doing right now. He creates threats on two minor pieces, ensuring that a trade will happen. So Fischer takes the bishop, and we have queen takes. And Sarah 1 gives an exclamation mark to this move. And although knight takes e7 is playable, he says that leaving this square is just, I don't know, just a big concession by black. Now, I'm not sure how big of a deal this is, but computer engine thinks it's fine, and it should be fine, but it's much less principled. You've got a strong knight in the middle, you should aim to keep it there. Alright, queen takes. So, game continues, knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, and now, after this exchange, we can see that this file is opened up. Now, white always needs to be careful of these interesting checks that could happen. Luckily, he has queen to block. But, yeah. Rook c1. Applying pressure on the pawn on c7 right away. And bishop e6. Now, Yasser also gives an exclamation mark to this move. He seems to be very generous with his annotations here. The point of this move is black wants to go c5, but can't go c5 right away. I remember that this pawn is backwards and it's like under pressure. And it'd be nice if black could just get rid of it and after some exchange, like possibly push it, and then there's no weakness. Usually you wouldn't want to push it though. You're just gaining space, and it's not really a weakness anymore. In fact, it could be considered a strength. But again, hanging pawn positions are very tricky to play. We'll see what happens in those. Usually, if the side with the hanging pawns gains enough space, it's like they tend to steamroll you, but the pawns themselves could turn out to be weak. Note that black does not go c5 right away, because after pawn takes pawn, white scoops up an extra pawn on d5. And we'll probably scoop up this one as well. So that's not played. And bishop e6. Queen a4, exclamation mark. This is not the best move according to the engine. Sarah 1 gives it an exclam. And I don't think it's an exclam, but it is a really interesting move, and it's only justified by the idea that Fischer reveals soon. Now, the chess.com analysis engine is telling me a5 is best. I'm not quite sure why, but I think it has something to do with queen b4 and just trading off the queens. When the ensuing trade happens, black will have some good pressure here. Maybe not this move right away, but that could be an idea. Black should go rook c8, push for c5, and is probably fine. Engine even gives a tiny plus to black. So queen a4, but Fischer has an idea in mind. c5. This is given an exclamation mark. I don't think it's the greatest move, but it's good because it's principled. Black wants to get rid of his backwards pawn. So c5. And now we see Fischer's idea. Queen to a3. Now, black cannot capture this pawn because he would just hang his queen. And so now we see this case of not quite hanging pawns yet, but they will be soon. So black plays rook to c8. I mean, makes a lot of sense. Just defending the pawn. White threatened to capture it. Again, 3 attackers and 2 defenders. So white is threatening to capture rook c8. It looks and makes a lot of sense to go knight d7. He gives a question mark to this move. Engine thinks it's fine, but again, it's not principled. Bishop b5 is what he gives. And here black has to find bishop g4, which I'm not sure if anybody would really consider, but yeah, moving the same piece twice in the opening, I'm not sure if would play bishop g4. The idea of this is that, of course, white wants to apply more pressure on this pawn indirectly by applying pressure on the knight. And it's done. Okay. White goes bishop to b5. This is the most active square for the bishop, and it's given an exclamation mark as well. The point of this move is that it's essentially the most active bishop move that you can make. And it restrains black's pieces a bit. For example, black would like to develop here. First of all, can't. That is not quite a free pawn. Knight here, b3. Black has to find all these moves and end up in a slightly worse position. The bishop's under pressure, and white has a really nice knight on d4. But the point of this move is white wants to also restrict the knight from going here as well. He gives, well, again, this is actually pretty much a transposition to the previous line where white is pressuring this and this. So this gets, although it's equal, it gets a bit spicy for Team Black over here. Alright, bishop b5 is played. And although bishop e2 is the best move according to the engine, it's much more passive and probably not the style of chess Fischer wanted to play here. This is probably his preparation, knowing that Karpov likes this variation. So bishop to b5, pawn a6. And this seems to be a step in the wrong direction. In the future games went with queen f8 or king f8, which seemed pretty awkward. The engine right now is telling me queen b7, I suppose preparing a6, sidestepping the pin as well. This is what king f8 and queen f8 aim to do as well to get out of this pin, which is really annoying. But a6 is played, and the thing is this move doesn't really do anything. It doesn't even threaten the bishop because the pawn is pinned. If knight c6, of course, we looked at this variation. Now Fischer takes the pawn on c5. He gives this an exclamation mark. Not quite sure about that. And the point here, I suppose, is white's next idea. After white gives black some hanging pawns, he wants to maneuver his knight to d4, utilizing the square and utilizing the pin. It's hard to explain, but it'll happen in a couple of moves. Takes, white castles. Again, the bishop is not hanging, and because of the pin. And now Spassky makes an inaccuracy. Rook to a7. Now, this is more like beginner chess, right? When you first see a piece and you're like, oh my gosh, I can make a threat. Oh my gosh, I should do it. But, so now black is threatening to capture the bishop because the queen guards the rook. But this seems to be, again, a step in the wrong direction. The rook will prove to be misplaced on a7. What black should have played here is queen a7, according to Sarawan. He gives, after bishop a4, bishop e2 is also playable, but after knight d7 and rook c3, white has a bit of pressure, but black should definitely be fine. Again, because the knight is guarding this pawn, and black has gotten themselves out of the pin, pawns aren't really weak anymore. And they're not really, they are targets, but it's not like white is going to give up a rook for any of these. Because the only way of attacking this pawn right now that white has is using the rooks. So after bishop a4, gives a5. And the idea of this move, again, is highlighted, is to go to a6 and then b4, plugging the queen, and then white's queen is just misplaced, and black is doing fine here. Bishop e2 is what Fischer plays, just getting the bishop out of danger. It was being threatened. Knight d7 is played, and now Nice move. Knight to d4, what we were talking about earlier. White is using this pin again, and now it's haunting black, right? Black is going to have to give up this bishop, and although it's not necessarily a good bishop, right, it's still a bishop, and giving it up will mean an imbalance, and Fischer is ready to take advantage of it. He's probably done some preparation, and we can see that. Okay. Queen f8 is played, and this is a mistake. It allows Fischer to execute a very nice combination. What black should have played is just knight f6. And after knight b3, again, you could take the bishop. But Sarah 1 gives knight b3. And the engine, after all this, is saying black is perfectly fine here. And I presume the reason why is that because these pawns are quite strong, and white doesn't have a super good way to attack them. Now this is still equal, probably because black also does not have a good way to advance the pawns, because white is applying a lot of pressure to them. For example, like rook c1, rook d1, possibly the bishop f3. And black can't really make much progress, but neither can white, because these pawns are really menacing. They control a ton of squares. So knight b3, c4, takes, and knight d4. And you can see here, although computer thinks it's equal, this knight is just blockading the entire position. This bishop is just bad. I mean, it's stuck inside its own pawn chain. And strategically speaking, white should be doing pretty well. White can continue to put pressure on this pawn in particular. And using rook d1, bishop f3, and white should never lose this and always have a slight pull. He gives this and evaluates this as a bit better for white after a5. Because black has some counterplay with controlling b7, going to b7 and like controlling the half-open b file and putting pressure and whatnot. Additionally, black might be able to run the pawn down the board. So, black has some counterplay, but I don't think it's enough. White is a bit better here. Nevertheless, this is still what black should have tried. Anyways, queen f8 was played. Knight takes bishop. Pawn takes knight. And now, very nice move played by Fischer. You can pause the video and try to find this move. I really like it. I mean, he doesn't give like a huge note to it, but this is a really insightful move, and yeah. So I'll wait. Alright. Fischer here plays the move pawn to e4, and this is a really great move. He's trying to break open the position, even at the cost of a pawn. Spassky in the game goes for d4. Now, this is also a very principled move, right? White has the bishop, black has the knight. Now, bishops like open positions, and we know that, and we also know that knights like closed positions. With Fischer breaking open the position, he's going to be able to use his bishop a lot better, especially since, like, say after takes, all the pawns are going to be targets, and they're all going to be on liked squares, so Spassky goes d4. Now, black could have played de4. It's not very natural, since, like, look at your pawn structure. Is this not the saddest thing you've ever seen? But apparently this is okay. Engine gives queen g3, but in his analysis gives rook c4, hitting the pawn. I feel like this is a lot more natural. Knight f6, rook c1, rook c7, and now queen a6. Yeah, black didn't have much of a choice there. And white maintains a lot of lingering pressure. He threatens the pawn on e6. He's not even down material anymore. And white can consider a long-term plan of, let's say, just moving the queen back and pushing the pawn, or utilizing this pin. But mainly just advancing the queenside passers. Black does not have much here and is stuck defending this pawn And these two pawns and this one as well don't really make much of an impression. Alright, so Spassky goes d4, and now we have f4, another good move. White is using his kingside majority and not threatening f5 because e5, right? But rather threatening e5, which is a strategic threat. And queen e7 is played, actually. This move does not actually address any of White's ideas. Perhaps Spassky wanted to play e5 himself, getting out of this pin, but he lets him play e5, so it was kind of a strategic fail. Now, Sarwan gives an exclam to this move. It's not the best move, but again, strategically, it makes a lot of sense. First of all, most of White's pawns are on dark squares, especially the ones where the action is happening. Clearly, White is going to attack on the king side. And note this, the rank after the few previous moves has opened up. So White's queen has a very easy getaway to the king side if it ever wants to go there. Wink wink. e5. And also, you want your pawns ideally to be on the opposite color of your bishop. Right now, White has a light squared bishop and dark squared pawns, which complement the bishop very well, because obviously a light squared bishop cannot control dark squares. So this is just really good harmony. It also fixes a target on e6, which is on a light square, which means that this bishop can take advantage of it. Rook b8, and again, this doesn't seem to be the right idea. Black is trying to obtain counterplay by applying pressure on this pawn, making sure that this queen can't just leave. But it just ignores all the threats on the king side, like this idea, and stuff like this. It's pretty nasty. Sarah 1 gives knight b6. And the idea of knight b6 is to plug this diagonal with the knight, and also immediately stop the bishop from coming here. So queen b3 is a move. It threatens the knight. Knight d5. f5 is what he gives. Rook b7, hitting the queen. Not the best move, by the way. Black has to find queen g5, and after takes, has to take here and then here. But that doesn't seem very realistic. This makes sense. Queen h3 takes. Bishop c4 is what he gives, and which is pretty funny, actually. Shows you that you can, in older games and older books, you can find mistakes in annotation. Here, bishop c4 is not good because of queen g5. Again, when black obtains some counterplay on g2, like possibly knight e3, not right now, but maybe queen e3 as well, and knight f4, and it's not really easy for White. Here White has has a very good move in f6. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and on knight takes pawn, bishop d3, and Black's king is just way too open. This pawn is hanging, this file is open, there's gonna be some check all over, and yeah, Black's e-pawn is also weak, so this is really good for White. He continues down the rabbit hole after bishop c4, rook d8, which is not the best move, and gives f e6. Still, f6 is completely winning, as you can tell. F e6 is what he gives, which is basically equal if Black finds rook b6, but he does not give rook b6 in the annotations. I guess it's quite a logical move, though. Defends this pawn and threatens to win back the lost material. But knight e3 is what he gives, and after rook f7, he says that White's position is dominating. I find it funny that they missed f6, but this is a while ago. Engines were not that strong at the time. Anyways, rook b8, bishop c4. White is entertaining ideas of f5, king h8, sidestepping that. And he also gives with knight b6, queen b3, and he threatened e6, and black hasn't really accomplished much. Importantly, black cannot move the knight to d5 because the rook is hanging. Queen h3, and this is a good move. White just swings the queen to the opposite side of the board, and this is why this rook b8 was a slight inaccuracy. It doesn't seem to accomplish much now, because now white is making a threat as well, right? So black has no time to take. In fact, the best move is indeed to take, and then the best move after this is to just take. And the reason why it's okay for white to lose this pawn, but not okay for black to lose this pawn, is because white controls the light squares. Black is not going to break through on the queen side, but white is surely going to break through on the king side. Like, look at all the pieces there. There's going to be a rook coming probably. Like, white's going to crash through here. Black isn't. So, queen h3, and black realizes he made an oopsie, defends the pawn, b3. And he doesn't give an exclamation mark to this move, surprisingly. I would honestly think it's a great move. When you're in such a dominant position, like, look at black's pieces. What is this silly rook doing? What is this stupid horse on f8 doing? Right? And you gotta look at black's only active piece. Oh, it's this dude over here, right? Oh, let's just make sure he can do nothing. So when you're in such a dominant position, you gotta just control all your opponent's counterplay, no matter if it's just a tiny little threat. Like just one measly pawn. Okay, a5, f5. Interestingly enough, this is a better move, and so is this. But f5 is thematic, and e takes f5. Again, this queen g5 move keeps appearing to create some counterplay. But here, after queen to g5, pawn takes pawn, and apparently black has to find rook e7. This is still looking pretty bad. White is up a pawn, and I don't see how black is going to really come back. Rook f7 is on the way. Yeah, this is not good. Okay, so black takes, rook f5, knight h7, rook f1. Now, white is now threatening to go rook f7. White was also threatening to go rook f7 here, but black played knight h7. And importantly, white went here, threatening rook f7 again. If white went rook f7 right away, this would be kinda not super good. Because after knight g5, rook e7, knight h3, gh, and rook takes rook, black emerges up 2 points. And through this fork, has one material. So that was a no-no. Rook f1 is played, renewing this threat. Now white actually threatens this rook f7 move, because after knight g5, white has multiple moves here, but probably simplest is just to defend the rook with like queen h5 or something. After takes, white is going to win material, because the rook is also defended by the queen. I'm not actually sure about this, but that's what it looks like. Anyways, queen d8 is played. Black does not want to get involved with this. Queen g3. White is sidestepping any knight g5, being a threat and attacking the queen. And simultaneously, put some pressure here. Maybe rook f7 would threaten mate, and introduces a possibility like of e6, and a lot of things busting open. Wink, wink. All right, rook e7 is played. Again, black doesn't have much to do. It's hard to suggest a move for black here. He's just trying to slow down White's attack. And now another nice move. I learned a lot from this game as well, in terms of b3 and this next move as well. I think this is very instructive. h4. Just utter domination. Black cannot do anything, and what White is trying to do is just trap this horse on h7. Can't go to f8, and it can't go to g5, which means it just can't move. F8 is controlled twice by the rooks and twice by the rook and queen, but the queen is worth more than the rook, meaning that White would win material. So not f8. Rook f8 should be good enough. Takes. White emerges up 2 points. So h4, a very powerful move. Rook b7. Just controlling here. Again, Black is just doomed to eternal passivity. White's pawns are on dark squares, and now the light squared bishop has come to life. And I'm sure Black really regrets giving away his light squared bishop now, because White just has an unopposed beast on c4. And now e6. Just controlling f7 one more time, and making sure the rook will indeed get there sometime. It is worth noting, though, that this move blocks off the bishop, so and relinquishes control of f6. Now the knight could possibly go there. But in return, again, White has gained control of the f7 square, as well as this entire diagonal for the queen, which becomes very useful later. Rook bc7. I mean, it's not like Black can do anything. So, queen e5. There's no reason to rush. Just asserting total dominance on the position, centralizing the queen. Queen e8. Like, what is Black supposed to do, right? So, I can't really comment much. And now a4. Again, unnecessary. I think Black was looking for some sort of counterplay here. Takes, maybe. And maybe getting in. That seems pretty far-fetched, but you can see Black's idea with queen e8, I suppose. But that's just shut down. Not the best move. But, just asserting dominance. Queen d8, nothing to do for Team Black. Rook f2. I mean, when you go rook f2, you're just trolling your opponent. He thinks this is a good move, but rook f3 is clearly better. Just stopping d3. He wants to tempt Black into playing d3, because after d3, rook d2, and the pawn's just lost. Like, you're just losing this pawn. You can go here and do some tricky stuff, right? Because if pawn takes rook takes queen. And even this is still good for White. In fact, I'd probably go for this. But, yeah, White doesn't even have to do that. You can just take the pawn if they like. I mean, White is spoiled for choice here. So, yeah, d3 is not good. Queen e8. And now White just goes rook f3. I mean, it's almost as if Fischer is trolling his opponent, because knows he can't do anything. And so Spassky is just sitting and waiting. I've had games where I just sat and did nothing, just moved my pieces back and forth, waiting for my opponent to prove they win. That's what Spassky is doing here, and sometimes it's a better idea than moving any of your pieces. Because if you look here, Black is practically in Zugzwang. Like, if he moves this rook to most places, well, you hang the pawn. Well, if you move the rook anywhere else, you lose control of f7. You can't move the knight anywhere, really. We'll see later what happens if you move the knight to f6. This rook is just can't move. And the queen is just limited to moving along the back rank because it needs to control f8 as well. So, and you could go king g8, but rook f7 would be that much more deadly because of control, right? Queen g8, bishop d3, and White is staging the final blow. He intends to build a battery to h7, which is just going to be devastating. It's just going to be game over here. Queen e8, and now queen e4, and now knight f6. Actually, I should probably give this move 2 exclamation marks. But I'll leave it at 1 for now, because that's what's in the book. It's a pretty straightforward move. White does not have any other way forward. Finally gives up his rook for a knight and a pawn. So white is down material here, but black cannot protect this pawn. We can look at some variations. Black played king g8 in this game, which is the best move. On king g7, white goes check, and then check here. And black has to block with the rook, which just can't be a good thing after pawn takes rook or like queen takes pawn. And queen h5 is another way to defend the pawn, but after rook f8, king here, queen h7, king f8, queen h6, 8. This is what I found, actually. But interestingly enough, Sarawan says g4. I was a bit shocked. I saw the mate in 3 pretty quickly, but I think this was John Nunn or someone who analyzed this portion. I was like, g4. But anything's winning at this point. I mean, it's plus 38. Like, I can't even lose this if he tried, right? And gives it queen takes, queen here, and mate. Black could go queen here, but loses control of e5, so queen e5, and this is just going to be mate soon. Funny how they miss mate in 3, though, so in old books you can definitely analyze some stuff. Bishop c4. Just total domination. Again, just making sure that the rook cannot move. Additionally, if black tries to do something tricky, like here, defending the pawn, white has multiple moves here. But queen f4 should do the trick. Discovered attack on the rook, and a threat to win the queen on the back rank. Black is pretty much dead here. Bishop c4, king h8 getting out of the way, queen f4. And with the dual threats of queen f8 and queen takes h6, black resigned. Now let's take a look at what could have happened here. Black obviously wanted to bait white into taking here, but this is a mistake. Because black might be able to fight on a bit longer here, although the situation is still hopeless. On king g8, which is pretty much the only move, white goes here and is going to mate pretty soon. In fact, he gives rook g6 check, which is definitely what I'd play in a normal game, but rook f5 is just going to be mate with rook g5 on the way, as well as like threats on the king here. And on rook g6 check, rook g7, e7, and this is going to be mate after queen here. And pick your favorite way. I would promote to a rook, honestly. Like, that's just the kind of person I am. He gives queen g7. Yeah, this is just brutal. So, what did we learn? Backing up, we can see that Fischer essentially started with this breakdown in the center. Well, he took advantage of a tactical resource in the position to gain the bishop, and then exploited the position for the bishop, right? Opening the position benefits the side with the bishop and not the knight. Goes here and makes sure that his pawns are on the opposite color of his bishop while gaining space, controlling all of black's pieces. b8, bishop c4, king h8, and now we see full board vision, right? This is another thing we learn. Prophylaxis, making sure black can't not do anything, paralyzing your opponent. And a4 as well, h4, moves like that. The battery, very effective. And don't be afraid to sacrifice material when you're completely winning. And you've got it all calculated out. Like rook takes f6 here. I mean, yeah, this is just a brilliant game. And it's no surprise why Fischer was the best player at the time. And it's also no surprise why Spassky just, applauded. And so did the crowd. And shook Fischer's hand. It's like, just played an absolutely brilliant game. So this is game 1 in this 11, 12 plus part series. I'll probably just keep uploading videos on these games. And with that, see you next time.